Hello everyone, today's topic is sample slicing in the grid. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Let's delete this and instantiate a new grid device. Okay, there are two conditions. First, the sample loop should have roughly the same tempo as your track. If it's a bit slower, it doesn't matter, but if it's faster, it can have kind of unwanted side effects. Secondly, it should be quantized. There are ways around it, and you can correct it if it's slightly off, but I found it easier when it's already quantized beforehand. So, well, most of my loops are quantized. In case they are not, I drop them in here, I stretch them to the tempo I need, and I quantize them, and then drop them into the sampler. So, that being said, let's dive in. Here's the empty grid. Detach the window so that we can drop something in here. Unfortunately, we cannot drag the sample in directly, as if there were any other things we could do with the sample in here. But don't want to complain, so let's go here and drop in a sampler, and once we've done this, we can drop the sample into the sampler. Now reattach the window, and before we forget it, we can mute the sample. Just make sure it's muted. Let's increase the size a little bit. So okay, nice. First things first, we need to move the playhead around, and we can do this by grabbing a modulator. And from level, we can pick a value, hook them up. This is the playhead position. Now apply a modulation of 100%. So now we can move the playhead, but what we wanted to do, we want to snap to discrete positions inside the sample. Now let's just think for a second about this. In Bitwig, every signal in the grid has a value between 0 and 1. There are bipolar signals that go from +1 to -1. In this case, it's 0 to 1. So end position is 1, start position is 0. And we have a loop here that is quantized. And what we want to do is divide this into different chunks. So how can we do that? We have a quantize module. Let's search for that real quick. Q, and we need this one here. And drop it in between the value and the modulator. Now this allows us to divide this value in here from 0 to 1 into discrete pieces. And this input here takes the fraction. So we go to math. Take a constant, duplicate it, take a division module, hook this up. No surprise, this is a division here. Now let's say we want to divide this into 8 steps. So 1/8, and now connect this to the quantization module and see what happens. Boom, boom, bam. Okay, that problem is solved. We can now snap to individual sample or slices start point. Secondly, we also want to loop these slices, which means we can just apply the same kind of modulation to the loop start point. If we now turn on looping, we can see that the loop start point moves along. However, what about the end of the loop? What do we need? We want to play this sample, so we could say the loop should have the length of the division here, the fraction that we have here. So let's move it to 0, grab another modulator out, and just use the result of the division as the input. Now let's apply it to the length. And as you can see, it's exactly what we have here. And now everything is hooked up that way. I mean, I can reduce the slices to, or increase the slices to 16, and the loop and everything automatically adjusts. Nice. So, but I don't want to trigger it with the keyboard, so I turn this off. Then I probably also don't want to use the value here to dial in the values. So let's remove it, go to data and grab a steps module, favorite module, as some of you might remember. Now hook this up and we are already jumping around in the sample. However, it's not yet doing what we want because we want it to retrigger whenever we switch the slice. So for that, we could use a gate module, but in this case, I can also use a probabilities module, which allows me not only to slice the sample, not only to create a trigger, but also control the probability of the event happening or not. For now, let's go for 100% and use this as an input. And yeah, we also want to use it to trigger the envelope. Okay, but we don't want it to play when it's stopped, so select the module here, and for both of them, select mute when stopped. Come on. Cool. And we also don't want to use the internal phase so that we can control how fast we want the sequencers to run. Go here and grab a phase module. That's the same that we have in here. We now just connect it from an outside source, which allows us to use things like a scaler, for example, and we can set up divisions here. For now, just leave it as is, but for other samples, you might want to change this, depending on your needs. So now this works. Let's get an oscilloscope so that we can look at some values. Hook this one up, for example. Good. Set it to fast. Well, there's a problem. Now, see, look at the first slice. It is somewhere. It is not at 0 whenever I hit play. Well, reason for that is it does not properly reset. This one, if you hit F, come on. Okay, you have to select it first. Okay, we need to reset the scaler whenever we hit the play button, or whenever the event happens that we want to retrigger, which in this case is play. So grab a play. This one always sets its output to true when it's playing, and to false when it's stopped. Okay, now this seems fixed. Nice. Now, what do we want now? Let's move this a bit out of the way. Maybe we want to control the length of the envelope playing. Well, first of all, it needs to be triggered by this. Let's go back to 8. So now the gate length is always 100%. Maybe I want it to be only a fraction. Something we could do is, for example, we have a gate length here, and when we have a trigger, we can set an absolute value how long we want it to be. However, I kind of want it to be quantized, and I want the maximum length to be as long as the division I have here. So what I came up with after some thinking about it is using an LFO, set it to square wave, and now we can control what we call the pulse width, the bias or the skew, which is, yeah, the pulse width in this case. And now we can use that one to control the ADSR. However, it's not set up correctly. We don't want the keyboard to trigger it, and we also don't want it to have any speed on its own. And here, this is the phase input. So now it's on hold. It's not doing anything on its own. It waits for a phase signal, which tells it to run, how to run through its cycle. And actually, I want to use this signal. But now this is way too long. Now this signal goes from here to here, right? And here we have 1, and then it jumps back. And I have a division here. I have 8 different steps. So I want to divide these signals into 8 pieces. And what we can do is just use another scaler, or we can actually duplicate this one, because you also need to reset it with the playhead and place it in front. Now, if I increase this number here to 8, you can now see it. It oscillates 8 times as fast, which means now we run through the entire LFO shape as fast as we run through one of these steps. So now let's see what that does. Cool, that seems to work. However, we don't want anything to happen when we're not playing. So we need to set up a little circuitry here that which breaks whenever these signals from going into the ADSR, whenever the playhead is not running. We already have one, and we could use the same one, but I sometimes don't like to. I try to avoid having too many cables running around, so it's easier sometimes to just duplicate this. So the condition is it has to play, and at the same time we need a signal from here. So okay, so let's go to the mix panel and grab a select module. This one is going to change the input. And the lower input will be active when we are playing. So in this case, we have an output. Whenever it's stopped, we don't. So now we can hook it up. Cool. Okay, let's make some space. And let's create the stutter device, or the stutter effect. Duplicate the steps module, zero it out. And what we need to do now is, well, we determine that the loop length is equal to the division here. So in order to get the stutter effect, we need to adjust the loop length, basically. So change the division. And how to do that? It is relatively simple. I mean, so we will take the result of this division and then use that and divide it further. So it'll make sense in a second. The first value has to be 1 because we cannot divide through 0. So I have 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now let's grab a merge module, increase the numbers of input to 4, and hook them up. Now you also want to make sure that it is set to nearest and not linear, because linear will fade between the values. We don't want that. We want discrete values. We want to be either 1 or 2 or 4 or 8. And we're using the steps module here to control the position. Okay, to visualize it a bit more, I want to introduce a way to manually control the steps. So let's grab a value and a modulator out. And we also need a select device, bear with me, and a button. So under normal circumstances, we just want the signal to pass through. So we just have to drop the select device onto the connection here, hook up the button, and whenever we switch to the second position, we want the value here to control position. However, nothing happens because we still have set these devices to mute when stopped. Well, fortunately, this is a value you can control with a modulator. So we can go to each of these devices and negatively modulate them to turn this off. So, and well, that's wrong. We need to connect the button. So whenever the button is on, you can see that the position is shown, and we can now use this value to scroll through every single position. So okay, here we have position 1, and now let's look at this. Okay, we now can switch between those values by increasing the level at a step. And as we said, we need to divide the result here of this division further through what we have here. And then instead of feeding that one in, we need to feed this result into the modulator. Let's see. Okay, we're now back on manual. I mean, it's also useful. You can go to every single step and set things up the way you like it. Cool, that seems to work. So, well, you can, of course, go further and divide it through 16 or whatnot. So what next? Maybe it would be nice to playing samples backwards. And this is fairly simple. Just duplicate, and make sure to duplicate because we have linked automation to it. And instead of steps module, we want to switch this into probability module, but you cannot select this directly. So let's go for gates first, and this one then can be switched to probability. And we need to modulate something whenever we get a signal here. So let's grab modulation out, hook it up. And in order for the sample to play backwards, the only thing we need to do is change the playback speed to -1, which means -2. And now whenever this signal is true, it will set the playback speed to negative, which automatically will result in a sample played backwards. Okay, you might hear these little clicks. Well, most of the time the problem here is that the sample is not 100% quantized, so you hear a little bit from the end of the sample or from the beginning of the next sample. So we need a way to control the position, the end position slightly. And to do that, we can duplicate one of the steps modules that we've been using, position it under the sampler. And now we're going to use this as a multiplication factor to control the length. So pull everything up. Again, as I said before, everything in Bitwig has a value between 1 and 0. And if we take that signal this signal, which is exactly this length here, and we multiply it with the signal here, which is at the maximum 1 and at the minimum 0, we get a fraction of that signal, right? And multiplication with a number smaller than 1 also always results in less. So now, why isn't it working? Okay, let's go to manual real quick. Okay, now I can control the step length for each step between 1 and 0. And obviously you can set up the same thing for the start of the sample if you think you need to adjust it. But I leave this up to you for now. So, okay, let's go back. This step was a bit misbehaving. So let's just reduce the step length only slightly, only a little bit. Okay, that removes the click. Now, what else would be nice? For example, when we... Yeah, let's take this loud thing here. It would be nice to be able to create like a roll that increases in amplitude instead of just static. And yeah, let's create something like that. Let me zoom out. Okay, we already have this signal here, which is providing a ramp for each step. So when I take that and duplicate the attenuation, drop it in here, turn it down to 0, grab a modulator out, hook it up and apply it to the attenuation. Now it's fading in the volume on every single step. But of course, it's not exactly what we want. So we need to set up something a little bit more complex. So take one of these gate modules, duplicate it, maybe increase the height so that we have better control. So let's think about this. This here increases the volume, but we don't want it to have any effect unless we do something here. So step 1 would be reducing the volume with this steps module. So because when you start reducing the volume, this one can have an effect. However, that's not all. We also want to increase the modulation amount the further up this value is here in the modulation in the steps module. So let's grab another. Let's grab an attenuator, drop it in between, and then the modulation amount is 0 unless we start increasing the value here. So, and it should be at 100% when the value here is at 100%. Let's listen to it. Well, I don't know if I explained this to your satisfaction, but I hope it makes some sense. Maybe you just have to think about it a little bit, and it will become clear. So what next? Maybe controlling the pitch. So let's grab one of these. Pitch is, of course, bipolar, or at least we want to use it that way, so that we can pitch upwards and downwards. And, well, it's as simple as you might have guessed. We just need to apply it to the pitch knob. However, we have to realize that in repitch mode, the pitch directly affects the playback speed. So whenever you increase the speed or the pitch, it will automatically also start reach the end of the sample quicker, so and will loop around. This is just something to keep in mind. Well, we can also always kind of reduce. While we're already on it, maybe you want control over the gate length of every individual step. And for that, we can duplicate one of the steps modules again, place it above here, and simply apply it to the gate here. And let's get a precise value here. Let's go it for 99.9%. I don't know if that works. Let's check real quick. Yeah. It's not visible here, but we still have the 0 at every end of the cycle. So that checks out. And now apply a negative modulation, or is that actually what we want? Okay, now we're able to control the gate length of each individual step. Clear this out. And yeah, I think now just zoom out a little bit and look at this construct. I mean, we don't even need this oscilloscope, and you look how actually few modules we needed to get a very, I would say pretty sophisticated sample slice machine, and we can change. Yeah, here you can select your sample. Here you can change the probability that the sample plays at all. Or wait a minute, maybe we have broken that. Yeah, we have broken that because when we made this, we actually need to set up an AND condition. So we only want to switch to the gated output when the playhead is playing and the probability module gives us a signal. So now that should work. And of course, yeah, this now begs for some additional treatment, like filtering. With yeah, why not a comb filter? Increase the feedback. Yeah, take another step module and hook it up to modulate the filter. Or set it to interpolation. Yeah, I think you get the idea. Yeah, use filters, shapers, whatnot. You can do, yeah, modulate the entire signal or do per step modulation. Yeah, it's really just the beginning. Hope it inspires you to do some stuff. You like the tutorial, of course. I hope you like the tutorial and it inspires you to come up with some new stuff. So like, comment, subscribe, and see you next time.